Itasca send weather report. We'll listen on hour and a half on 3105. KHQQ to Itasca, send weather report. We'll listen on hour and a half on 3105. Dear Pidge, it's 3 a.m. on July 2nd. Or maybe it's July 3rd. Not sure if we're on Greenwich Mean Time or International Waters Time. We left New Guinea yesterday at 10 a.m. and have been flying for 17 hours, with another 4 to go until we reach Howland. The sky is quiet this morning, thankfully. Yesterday, heavy winds and rains battered the plane, ate up most of the fuel reserves, which is worrisome, but I dared not turn back. What would George say? The world is watching, can't stop now. This will be my last stunt, Pidge. Barnstorming world record-chasing stunt pilots are becoming a relic of the past. GP says it's time to retire. Perhaps he's right. What else is there to conquer that hasn't already been done? Another world record under my belt. When we finish, I will jump into touring. The money's earned will keep me warm for the rest of my life. But don't tell anyone I said that. This is a flying laboratory to advance scientific research for long-distance flying. I resent any other implication. As I gaze out my window, the view is a blank canvas. You'd think the Milky Way would encamp in the night sky, but blackness abounds. I hope the moon will show herself. It's so breathtakingly beautiful on a night flight when the moon emerges from behind a cloud and takes your breath away as it casts its shadow light. Just you, the stillness, the engine's roar, and the moon, suspended in space and time. I find myself alone in the cockpit for this leg, having banished my navigator to the back of the plane. Thus my thoughts reach out to you. Oh, damn! I forgot to send you a cable. I was up to my ears in flight checks, as in George telegraphed he arranged for reporters to meet us at Howland without consulting me, and it really steamed me up. But that's George. Push, push, push. And those reporters haven't exactly been my friends. You know what they called me? A dunce. A dunce! Why is she flying the Lockheed Airster? It can make the jump without fueling. What a dunce. And this was right before takeoff. All in an attempt to shake my confidence. I overheard my mechanics giving me a 1 in 20 chance of reaching Howland. Heck, I'll take those odds. They gave me 1 in 100 when I flew the Atlantic. You'd think that victory would have silenced the critics, but no. I chose the Electra over the Airster because I know how to fly her. I've never flown the Airster. I went with what I knew. I shall not dwell on their judgments any longer. I like the Electra. She's a big, sturdy ship. I like to fly her. End of story. There's not much to do until we reach Howland, and I am in desperate need of conversation. How I wish you were my travel companion, but I am stuck with Fred. Fred and I have been circumnavigating the globe since May 20th in the year of our Lord, 1937. But you already knew that. Having flown across 3 continents and now the expansive Pacific Ocean. He usually sits up front, but lately he's been getting on my nerves. Or I on his. Either way, we both agree that he needs to stay in the back of the plane to do his work. He can do his other business back there too. There's a tube he can use to relieve himself, but I have no such option and have peed myself repeatedly, which thankfully has gone unwitnessed, though I cannot vouch for the smell. At least the puddle is warm. The roar of the engines cuts off verbal communication, so the only way for Fred and I to talk is by passing notes written on little white pieces of paper attached to a fishing line. It's quite comical to have one's messages reeled in. It adds levity to our exhaustive flight. Here comes one now. What do you call a sleeping dinosaur? I don't know, Fred. What? Undina snore. Fred sits starboard in the rear of the ship on a platform by a window where he observes the night sky armed with a sextant and compass. His chronometer, charts, and almanacs clutter a makeshift table suspended above the fuel tanks on the port side of the ship. A slim man, slightly stooped, Fred measures time. 4 timepieces encircle his left wrist, the accuracy of which bears importance to aerial navigation. Without time, we are lost. If his timepiece is off by even 1 minute, it can position us 60 nautical miles off target. But Fred Noonan is the world's greatest aerial navigator and keeper of the time, so I am confident we will reach our destination. We should reach Howland by 7 a.m. I have a thermos of warm cocoa for the trip, as you suggested. Much better than tomato juice, given my stomach issues. Some chocolate squares, an egg or two, and smelling salts to revive myself if I should nod off. I'm not sure what will knock me out first, the tiredness or the stench of urine and gasoline. I can't wait to eat a proper meal and have a wash. Overtired as we are, we push forward, yearning for home. We should arrive in Hawaii, GWWP, that's God willing, and weather permitting, at some day and time that only Fred knows how to calculate, 3 weeks before my 40th birthday. Hope to see you soon. Give Mother a kiss for me. Your loving sister, Amelia. 3:30 a.m. Thank you, Freddie. Let me know when it's 5 a.m. KHQQ to Itasca, send weather report. We'll listen on hour and a half on 3105. KHQQ to Itasca, send weather report. We'll listen on hour and a half 3105. Knock, knock. Who's there? Noble. Noble who? No bell. That's why I knocked. I know it was you, Freddie, who told reporters that when I ditched the parachutes, I refused to surrender my jar of freckle cream. I am plagued with freckles. They are a menace that invade my cheeks and nose every summer. And I did not pack a compact. Why would you tell them that? Once a powder puff, always a powder puff. Golly, Freddie, whatever do you mean? All flash, no substance. I knew what he meant. Back in 1929, Will Rogers, the twit, may he rest in peace, stopped by the starting line of a California to Chicago Derby. It was an exciting event, for it was the first time women were allowed to race. Before then, we could barnstorm, crop dust, transport medical supplies, but not race. As the starting flag was lowered, he turned to a reporter and quipped. The female gene compelled each racer to take one last glance at her compact, along with a dab of powder on her nose. 3 cheers for the Powder Puff Derby. The name stuck. The diminution of women. It's always been there from the first days of barnstorming to racing, when they finally allowed us to compete, but only at appropriate speed, to being denied a commercial pilot license because a menstruating woman is a danger to her passengers. And the press emboldens it. When I soloed the Atlantic, the headlines ran, Mrs. George Putnam arrives safely in Ireland. I have told the press time and again, my name is Earhart, Amelia Earhart. You know, my father used to work for the railroads as a company lawyer. Did you know that when travel by steam locomotive first laid tracks across the country, women were barred from trains because they feared a woman's body could not handle the speed? They actually believed our uteruses would fly out of our bodies. Wind 097 degrees, 41 miles per hour. Thank you, Freddie. Increasing speed to 150 miles per hour. Beneath Freddie's ribbing is his affirmation that flying should be left to the men. It comes down through the ages, doesn't it? Women bred for timidity. I suppose flying is where I take my stand, and it's proven difficult, what with the press always there to capitalize on every mistake. There's an attitude in the press, contrary to legal precedent, that women are considered guilty of incompetence until proven otherwise. Take the Derby. The male pilots sabotaged our fuel lines and put dirt in the engines, causing crashes. Then, the crowds who cheered us on parked their cars onto the landing strip, leaving us no choice but to plow right into them, and in both instances, the hysteria in the press. Stop the race! Stop the race! These women have proven conclusively they cannot fly. Proving the naysayers wrong, especially where my abilities are concerned, has always been a driving force in my life. By the by, Fred, I wrote a book about my record-breaking solo Atlantic flight called The Fun of It. Did you happen to read it? I wrote a textbook on the latest advances in celestial navigation. Did you happen to read that? Certainly not. I will stick to flying, thank you. AE, what makes an airplane fly? I don't know, Freddie. What? Money. It's just a stunt, he said to me one night over a too-spicy meal somewhere in the Sudan, to promote your new book. It's all part of the Amelia Earhart fame machine, orchestrated by your husband, he says. It's all about personal gain, not advancing long-distance flying or whatever it is you tell the press. Of course it's a stunt. That's what I do, Freddie. I'm a stunter. Those are my roots. I learned early on that exhibition opens doors. I can be of influence and help people. So don't feed me rubbish, Freddie, that I am only in it for the money. Besides, don't you hope to profit by your association with me to fund your flight school? If you can profit from my work, why shouldn't I, you chauvinistic asshole? Dear Pitch, Fred keeps needling me about how I make my money. I try to tell him I am not the only female pilot with a book deal and a signature luggage line. He acts like I've never had to work for anything in my life. One night Fred says, I've worked for every penny I ever earned by the sweat of my own hands. And what are you? A fabrication of your husband's greasy wheels. Besides, it's not like you're the best pilot out there. He'd been drinking. I cried myself to sleep. He seems to think that GP is my butter and egg man. I didn't marry George for the money like he says. I am the cash cow, not the other way around. I shall not worry any longer what he thinks. Love you, Neely. What does he know about my life, anyways? Back in 1917, when young men's bodies were being blown to bits in no man's land, I was learning the proper way to set a table and how to sit like a lady with my ankles crossed just so at a finishing school in Philadelphia. My mother insisted I attend. How else could I marry the right sort of man? Over winter break, I decided to visit my sister in Toronto, where she attended a private high school. One cold, gray afternoon, I went shopping in town. As the wind bit off my nose, I pulled my coat tighter around my frame to keep from freezing as I scurried down the sidewalk. Coming towards me was a group of young men, soldiers in thin woolen coats. One lacked a leg, the other an arm. A third was blinded in one eye. They walked on crutches. They walked slowly, huddled together against the wind, and I felt their suffering, and I wanted to help immediately. When I make up my mind to do something, I do it. I enrolled in a first aid course with the Red Cross to be certified as a nurse's aide and got a job straight away at the local veterans hospital. I never returned to finishing school. While working, I befriended some of the pilots who invited my sister and I to stop by the airbase to show off their big mechanicals with their noisy engines. We stood in the bitter cold as specks of snow swirled about, watching the planes take off, and I longed to be in the air with them. It was a quiet longing, a seed planted that would follow me to New York, where I enrolled in pre-med at Columbia, then later to Los Angeles, the birthplace of the aviation industry, having dropped out of school yet again. It was an exciting time to be in California. The invention of the sports plane was being worked out in the air. Engines exploded, wings caught fire, all in the name of advancing aviation. You had to be mad to be a pilot, to daily risk your life, but that was the lure, the danger. And it was like a magnet, and I had to be part of it. I started taking lessons, then bought my first plane, a bright yellow 2-seater biplane I named the Canary, and started doing stunts. Many a time I crash-landed in a cabbage patch. I had to look the part, of course, so inch by inch I cut my hair. I didn't do it overnight, lest my mother be upset, but little by little, until it was too late for her to protest. I was having the time of my life. Then one day, it all came crashing down. My parents' marriage broke up, and I found myself financially responsible for my mother's well-being. I had to sell my plane. We moved to Massachusetts to live with my sister. I secured a position at the Dennison House, working full-time as a social worker, earning $35 a week. I got a second job working weekends as a demo pilot, and when there were no customers, I got to take the plane up for free. That was the only flying I ever did in those days, and that was my life. I worked, I spent time with family and friends, and flew whenever I could. Then one day, fate intervened. Amelia, you have a phone call from George Putnam. Who? George Putnam. He says it's urgent. Tell him I'm busy. He insists. I take the call and curtly ask what he wants, miffed that he had interrupted my lessons. Hey there, this is George Putnam. How'd you like to be a passenger aboard a transatlantic flight? Now, don't you worry, it's all on the up and up. Mrs. Amy Guest, you know, the wealthy heiress, can't make the trip, so we thought you'd be the perfect replacement. Why don't you come down to New York and we'll iron out the details? This is an opportunity that is not to be missed. KHQQ to Itasca, we've been trying to reach you. Please send weather report. Respond on hour and a half on 3105. KHQQ to Itasca, we've been trying to reach you. Please send weather report. Respond on hour and a half on 3105. I will make noise in mic. Why aren't they answering? I'm the navigator, not a radio operator. That's helpful. On June 18, 1928, the Friendship, piloted by Bill Stultz and Slim Gordon, touched down in an isolated harbor in Wales, having successfully flown a female passenger across the Atlantic Ocean. Bill and Slim, the brave pilots, were the real heroes of the day, but the press went crazy over me. We returned to New York to a ticker tape parade. The crowd smothered me, pulled at my clothes. Reporters followed me to work, camped outside my home. Advertisers used my image to endorse products I didn't condone, like cigarettes. I've never smoked a day in my life. And the hate mail, thousands of letters condemning my short hair, my trousers, my smoking. I even got to meet President Hoover. What was I doing at the center of all this excitement? George put me there. He manipulated the headlines to read as if I had piloted the plane, and he made damn sure I was front page news. I went from being an obscure social worker to one of the most famous female pilots. in the world, overnight, and I hadn't even touched the wheel. I felt humiliated, all that false attention, and I didn't like borrowed feathers. I hadn't earned the attention. Meanwhile, across the pond, Lady Mary Heath and Amy Johnson were setting real long-distance flight records, doing the real work, and George went out of his way to make sure their names never got above the fold. And as the years progressed, he did everything he could to shut out and shut down the competition, something for which I will never forgive him. In 1928, I became the face of aviation, and everything prior to that became the before times. Don't think it hasn't been a tug-of-war over the years to maintain my sense of self, to travel through this world on my own terms, lest it be snuffed out by the users and the critics. A pilot walks into a bar and says, I know this one, fill me up. In those first days of fame, when the spirit of adventure that burned brightly within my soul had been trampled by the crowds, I sought out small windows of opportunity to escape the public's eye. One time, I flew cross-country in an avian monoplane that I bought from Lady Mary when I first met her in London. It was a grand time of grease under my nails. I had no road map. All I could do was follow railroad tracks and highways, as there were very few established airfields across the country. I landed in fields of tall grasses with potholes and rocks that damaged landing gear, and had a splendid time fixing it. The plane's engine coughed and sputtered, then stopped habitually, requiring emergency landings in the mesquite bushes of the salt hills, or in the middle of the road, in the middle of Main Street, in the middle of a small town, in the middle of nowhere, where I'd pull the plane to the side of the road to go eat lunch at a local diner. Salted ham, rosemary roasted potatoes, and watery cabbage. You know what the best part of flying is? Right before you land, the moment before you touch down, there's a sensation of appreciation and gratitude for having been able to suspend in the vastness of air and sunlight and wind, for up here there are no rules, no barriers. You don't have to fit in or live up to anyone's expectations. It's uncharted, and you can be whoever you want to be. And it's all right there, in that moment, right before you touch down, and then you're back, and the weight of gravity hits you, and the heat of the day presses against you. The trick is to carry it with you, that feeling, when you walk about. I think I lost that feeling somewhere between the headlines. Knock, knock. Who's there? Dozen? Dozen who? Doesn't anyone like my jokes? AE, what happens to a bad airplane joke? It never lands. Oh gosh. Oh God, my sinuses. Back when I worked as a nurse's aide in Toronto, I contracted pneumonia that infected my sinuses, so I had to have an operation. They did a terrible job of it, so I had to have another one and then one more to fix the problems the first two caused. I was laid up for over a year. The only good to come of it was that I lived with my sister while I recuperated. I took up the banjo and wrote poetry. Merciless life laughs in the burning sun, and only death slowly circling down. My sinus is never quite healed. I get terrible headaches, but I soldier on. Nobody knows this, but every time I fly, the change in pressure inflames them, and fluid gets backed up, so I have to stick a tube in my right cheek to drain them. It's been very difficult to hide it from the fans and the press. George has a habit of restaging my landings. He puts a patch over the tube to hide it, and always makes sure they photograph me from my left side. Of course, he could just let me rest, but that's not George's style. 5 a.m. Thank you, Freddie. Let me know when we're at 200 miles. George plays a dual role in my life. Devoted husband and merciless promoter. Sometimes it's difficult to separate the two. George Putnam, the spoiled son of a wealthy publishing mogul. People either love him or hate him. Most people loathe him. My own mother discouraged the union. We married one afternoon in the guest parlor of his mother's house in Connecticut in front of a judge and 2 witnesses. His mother served cold ham sandwiches. I wore trousers. I wrote him a letter the morning of, outlining my thoughts on marriage, how if after 1 year we weren't keen on each other, I asked to be set free, and I insisted on keeping my name. No one knew about the ceremony, not even my family. I telegraphed Pidge afterward saying, I jumped over the broom with GP, console mother. Knock, knock. Who's there? Hawaii. Hawaii who? I'm good. Hawaii you. What's the first thing you're going to do when we land? I'm going to get a manicure. Kiss my wife. My mother didn't approve of George. I suppose she had her reasons, but I married him anyways. Must be a family trait. My father, Edwin, was a young attorney building his practice when my parents first met. Edwin came from humble beginnings, the son of a Lutheran preacher who hoped to better himself. My mother, Amy, was the daughter of a prominent and wealthy Episcopalian family where the men were judges and lawyers who had political influence. My grandparents were philanthropic, deeply concerned for the welfare of the poor, unless, of course, one of them wanted to marry their daughter. That was another matter entirely. My mother could be stubborn about getting her way. I suppose I take after her in that respect. Her family didn't approve of Edwin, but she wanted to marry him anyways. So my grandfather said, when Edwin has proven that he can earn $500 a week, I will consent to this marriage, knowing full well that Edwin would fail. We Earharts like to prove people wrong. Edwin met those terms. It took him 5 years, but he did it. But over the years, the bar was always held a little too high for him. And when he couldn't measure up, it drove him into the ground. There was a time when Father couldn't keep a job. We bounced around from place to place with no landing in sight. Sometimes we had no money for food or oil for the lamps. Other times we were outright homeless, living in tents. I didn't question any of this as a child, but did wonder why my mother's family didn't step in to help. What happened to my mother's money? Perhaps it was tied up in a way that Edwin couldn't get his hands on it. Perhaps my mother saw our homelessness as a romantic adventure and didn't seek help. Or perhaps, in the lottery of marriage, the husband either provides or he doesn't. And that's your lot in life. That's why it's so important for a woman to have her own money. I remember when I was at Columbia, so many of my girlfriends dropped out after they got engaged. Their fiancés insisted. But that was never an issue with George, my continuing to work. I suppose that's why I married him. "200 miles. Thank you, Freddie. Let me know when we're at 100 miles. Sunrise over the Pacific looks like orange sherbet. I love sunrise. It's my favorite time of day. When I was younger, living in California with my parents, I was gone for one of the boarders who lived with us, a young man, tall, broad-shouldered. We met under the hot California sun at a time in my life when everything seemed possible. That's when I met you. I met you when I had just discovered my love of flying and crowned myself a pilot by cutting my hair. Sam Chapman, you were my two-footed love, an anchor in the storm. I couldn't imagine that there was someone like you for me, who believed in social justice, who philosophized. I loved our conversations while sitting on the beach watching the sunrise, then later the moonrise. Your arms around me as a soft breeze caressed my face. And then everything came crashing down. Sam and I got engaged around the same time my father squandered all our money. When Mother and I moved to Massachusetts, Sam soon followed when he accepted a job in Boston. He commuted in from Marblehead, the place he grew up and where he lived with his family. A quiet seaside hamlet with its gray patched cottages, dirt roads, and traditional New England values. A place where the dank, salt air coats everything. Life settled into a comfortable routine. I spent most weekends in Marblehead. I'd wheel into town in my bright yellow sports car, kicking up dust as I sped down the road. A cloud of dirt heralding my entrance. I liked kicking up dust, seeing it settle on his pressed, buttoned-up collar, which, because of the dust and the heat, he'd remove, then roll up his pant legs and dive bare-chested into the ocean. On quiet evenings, he'd stand ankle-deep in the surf, smoking his pipe, his thoughts rolling out to sea. What he didn't realize is that I am like the tide. You can't hold me to shore. He was too rooted for adventure, moored to convention. He could have come with me on the famed treadmill, or at the very least waited for me to touch down, like the many brides waiting atop their widow's walk for their wailing husbands to return home. The tide always comes in. I would have always come home to you, if only you had let me set sail. He didn't understand my need to prove myself. He insisted I stop working and give up flying once we married, to cut out a piece of my soul to fit into his conventions. He thought since I'd been given a name, a place, a role, a duty, what more could I want? I'd be fitted to his life like the starched dresses I had to wear as a young girl. How I hated ribbon and lace, the confinements of propriety and society. I ripped and tore those dresses whenever I climbed trees. My mother was wise enough to see that I needed proper play clothes. Why couldn't he be as flexible? He believed his love to be as vast as the sky, that I would be satisfied to flap about in it like a kite. But how could I ever be free when he controlled the strings? Never fully free to explore, to discover, to try. And I tried, I did. I tried to be who he wanted me to be for years. I tried. At least some part of me tried. But I wasn't willing to give up who I am just to be married. Even to him. People say I tossed you aside when I became famous. They say I dismissed you. But your inability to imagine a different life for us left me at the mercy of fame. Where was your steady hand when the flash of cameras blinded? Where was your laughter when gasoline stained my blouse and no amount of scrubbing could get it out? The riptide of 1928 swallowed me whole. There'd be no returning to shore. Impatient demands on my time and person pulled me adrift. A whirlwind took me higher, lifting me off the ground like a cyclone, destroying everything that came before. But it wasn't the lift of love and beauty, one that connects you to light and sensation and inspiration, like when one flies for the fun of it. It was the lift of endless hunger, need, and want, insatiable, like the many empty stomachs of the people on our nation's bread lines. Too many mouths to feed. Where was your philosophy then, my ocean friend? Where was the port in the storm? I needed you to be my co-pilot, but you didn't like to fly. What is that? Oil? Gasoline? God, give me grace. Why, you lousy mug, you low-down snake in the grass. What's with you? I can smell the whiskey, Freddie. Don't get a bee in your bonnet. Are you drunk? I don't have to dignify that. I trusted you. During Prohibition, I was forced to live for days on nothing but food and water, but keep your sorries. It won't get us safely home. 100 miles. Confirm coordinates. Thank you, Freddie. You lily-livered, yellow-bellied sap. KHQQ to Itasca, please take bearings on us and report in half hour. KHQQ to Itasca, we've been trying to reach you. Please take bearings on us and report in half hour. I will make noise in mic. Who built an airplane that couldn't fly? The Wrong Brothers. Dear Pidge, we're in trouble, George and I, financially. I never told you. I didn't want to worry you, but his business took a terrible hit after the crash, and his company has gone into arrears, and it's only a matter of time before they have to close their doors. We keep up appearances, but our financial future hangs around my neck, and if I lose my footing, then it's all over. There's been a development with my navigator, and for the first time, I feel afraid. Your presence is always a comfort. Our father drank. He was a boozer who fell off the wagon and stayed in the dirt. A dreamer who could never seem to hold down a job. His work took him all over the Midwest, away from his family. It must have started innocently enough, going out with colleagues after work to fancy hotel bars, throwing money around, trying to keep up appearances of wealth and prosperity, when he was drowning. One night of drinking turned into 2, then 3, then during the day, then at work, and by the time we were all able to live together, coming home every night, 3 sheets to the wind, we hated him. The imposter. His drinking gets him fired, and we have to move again and again until my mother leaves him. My father moves to California, checks himself into a sanatorium, and slowly climbs out of his hole the way a pilot has necessity to climb above a storm. Mother eventually forgives him. But the storms are still there. So much so, I drop out of med school to be of service to my mother. It was then that I moved to California. You know, it's funny. It was my father who got me into flying. He took me to Kinnear Field to an air show and paid for me to go up. Frank Hawks offered $1 a ride, and as soon as we left the ground, I knew I myself had to fly, knowing full well I'd die if I didn't get to do it. Lessons were $1,000 each. $1,000! Can you imagine coming up with that kind of money? I took on several part-time jobs to raise the money, but what I didn't know is that my grandmother left me a sizable trust that my mother managed, and my father had been dipping into it to cover his losses from bad investments and get-rich schemes. He took all the money from my trust and my mother's trust, with her permission, all of it, every penny, wiped out. That's the last straw for my mother. She divorces him. Now wholly dependent upon me for her survival, I buy a sports car in which to speed away from my father, make my own way in the world. I guess you can't outrun your family. My father died the year before I married George. 7 a.m. 7 a.m.? Where are they? I don't know. We should be on top of them. Obviously we're not. She should be here. Recheck the coordinates. I have. We need confirmation. KHQQ to Itasca, please take bearings on us and report in half hour. KHQQ to Itasca, please take bearings on us and report in half hour. I will make noise in mic. There should be smoke. From the Itasca, she's supposed to release a thick black smoke, a billowing stream of ink like a lighthouse beacon. But I don't see anything. We're circling the drain, and all I can think about is this horse I grew up with. Nellie. She was the neighbor's mare. It was the era of stylish turnabouts, horses tortured by check reins, bobtails, cruel bits. My heart raged at the mistreatment of the horses in those days. Grocery boys would lash half-starved horses up and down the street while delivering telephone orders. Tired milk wagon horses were forced to race back to the stables after driving on the milk route since 4 a.m. I believe that when one feels something deeply, one has to take action about it. I couldn't do anything about the work horses, but the turnabouts, perhaps I could free them from the check reins. That's when the reins are positioned to pull a horse's head to the left, straining its neck, holding it in check, so that when fashionable people's carriages line up, all the heads face in the same direction. One day I took a knife from the kitchen and ran downtown to the courthouse where my grandfather used to work as a circuit court judge and slashed all the reins up and down the line of buggies. Nellie was kept in a low-roofed shed that was too small for her frame, so she'd kick and whinny from the heat in cramped quarters. To shut her up, a neighbor whipped her legs till she bled. The more she kicked, the more he whipped. One day the neighbor is harnessing her outside the shed when a piece of old newspaper blows across the yard. She rears in fright. He whips her viciously, tearing her flesh. She bolts down the driveway with the traces and reins flying in all directions. "Run away! Run away!" the man shouts. All the neighbors come a-running to see what the commotion is about as the horse gallops down the hill to the Claw River Bridge, where she jumps over the rail and drowns in the river. "7:30 a.m., fuel running low." KHQQ calling Itasca. We are circling but cannot hear you. Go ahead on 7500 with a long count, either now or on the half hour. We are running out of gas. Repeat, we are running out of gas. What's the fuel time? Fuel time, Fred? 9 a.m. Best come up front now, Freddie. It's pitch black. The Furies pummel my plane with heavy rain and sleet, tossing me about like cottonweed. It's certain death. I cry gasoline tears. The fuel line broke, dripping gasoline into my eyes. The manifold ring breaks. Fire! Fire! I blaze across the sky like a comet. A trail of fire cuts the cloud. It burns. Burns! I summon the courage to keep going. Courage is the price that life extracts for granting peace. The soul that knows it not, knows no release from little things, knows not the livid loneliness of fear, nor mountain heights where bitter joy can hear the sound of wings. "8:30 a.m., 15 minutes of fuel remaining. Fred, get up here. Not everyone survives the Atlantic. The Atlantic is the Pacific Ocean's angry cousin. I can smell her salty waves, feel the sting of an unforgiving, unpredictable, temperamental ocean with an icy attitude spitting hail and sleet. The breakers around St. John's is littered with dead pilots' failed attempts to make the jump, but I was not dashed upon the rocks. I am the only woman to solo the Atlantic. I proved to myself and the world that I am a capable pilot. But what does any of that matter now? If we crash today, they will blame me, the incompetent woman. We always said she wasn't the best pilot out there, and look, we were right. KHQQ to Itasca, we are on the line 157-337 heading north and south. KHQQ to Itasca, we are on the line 157-337 heading north and south. KHQQ to Itasca, what did one hat say to the other? You stay here, I'll go on ahead. Amelia! Amelia! They grab at my clothes. Take off your hat, Amelia! Show us your hair! No more hats, Amelia! I insist! Yes, dear, they have to see your hair! And stop showing your teeth when you smile! Nobody wants to see that gap! Remember to close your mouth, and left side profile only! We don't want them to see that tube in your face! Telegram from GP to AE. Congratulations on solo flight. Stop. Restage the landing. Stop. Newsmen with cameras to seal the deal. Stop. Fix your hair. Stop. Close your mouth. Stop. Left side profile only. Stop. Enough. No one. Check reins me. KHQQ to Itasca, we are on the line 157-337 heading north and south. KHQQ to Itasca, we are on the line 157-337. KHQQ to Itasca, can you read me? This is Amelia Earhart. This is Amelia Earhart. Please, come in. KHQQ to Itasca, this is Amelia Earhart. Help! Time has stopped. It was a river cascading over a rocky cliff, pulling us to water's wake. Then it stopped. I am suspended in all time like the full circle of a rainbow caught in a propeller's whirl. Out the starboard window is the first of times. The first time my father comes home drunk. The first time my mother leaves him. The first time I am the breadwinner in the family. The first time my name is in the paper. And here, out the port side, is the last of times. The last time I fly for the fun of it. The last time I know peace. The last time I have anything real. The last time my family is all together. Forward, a long road stretches in front of me, an adventure, a cross-country flight, and the sun is about to set. So I touch down in a field to camp overnight. The stars blanket the sky. It's as if all my hopes and dreams are suspended in a dome, reflecting back to me the long-ago wishes of a lonely girl, winking at me as if to say, that which is in our heart lives on. The stars sing me to sleep, a quieting lullaby. The road bends. A lively stream winds its way through open grasses. It's Deer Creek, my father's favorite fishing hole. Father! Father! We're running out of gas. Cast your line, just like I taught you, just so. Life and best made plans, Mealy, seldom go hand in hand. Reel it in. There you go. Nice and easy. No fish today. Oh well, sometimes they bite, sometimes they don't. But you never know until you cast your line. Akamaracas, Mealy, akamaracas! Father throws the pole over his left shoulder and walks home, whistling, content with nothing but having enjoyed the day. The creek turns to glass, an image appears, someone comes, knock, knock, who's there? It's George, with two heads, a receiver in each hand, talking out the side of his mouths, informing the handsome co-pilot, the distinguished radio operator, that he is no longer needed, insisting it's for the best, as a green fog encircles his head, while simultaneously giving instructions to the Coast Guard, neglecting to tell them I will be using voice radio, not thinking it significant. But wait, all is not lost. A radio detection finder is built on the island just for us. But it can't hear us. The battery ran out hours ago. Another image comes, a map, our map, the map used by Freddie. There's an X over Howland and a line drawn to over there. She's not where she's supposed to be. We're never going to find her. Oh, Father, sometimes the fish don't bite. I am here in the cockpit in a time of revelation. I am just an ordinary gal who did extraordinary things. It was never about being the best. If that is all people care about, then where is the joy of experience? I reached beyond what I thought I was capable of and hoped to inspire others to do the same. I learned that in whatever way you can, no matter your circumstances or the times in which you live, find the joy in life and reach out a helping hand to others along the way. There's more to life than being a passenger. I flew by the seat of my pants, Poppy, just like you taught me. Akamaracas, for the fun of it. Time. It's speeding up. It's pulling me back in. Fred! Fred! Get up here! Pidge! Pidge! I love you! KHQQ2 Tasca. We are on the line, 157-337. KHQQ2 Tasca. We are on the line, 157-337. KHQQ2 Tasca. This is Amelia.